Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
On so many different levels, the opioid crisis is really a humanitarian one, and it affects people on so many different levels. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about not only current projects, but how they got started, state of the industry, so very much more in a light and conversational fashion, because that's how we like to do it. And if you like how we do it and you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, you can do just that. We'd love it if you did too. You can find us basically wherever your podcasts are, over Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Google. It's all good. And you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that over at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for all sorts of updates. And finally, and dare I say most importantly, if you would do us the kindness of paying us a visit over at intheseats.ca with all sorts of fun news, reviews, and everything else under the sun. We even posted a few contests today. It almost feels like we're getting back to normal. But on this episode, we've got a good one, and it's a movie that just hit video on demand, and hit it on video on demand pretty well. It is a film called Crisis, starring Gary Oldman, Armie Hammer, and Evangeline Lilly, from writer-director Nicolas Jarecki, and it is about three different stories basically inside the world of the opioid crisis. One from the scientific angle, one from a family angle, and one from a law enforcement angle. And it's a very well done film, which we highly recommend. And we got the distinct pleasure to sit down with writer-director Nicolas Jarecki to talk about the film, why he acted in a film for the first time, and just sort of really the compelling nature of stories like this that have so many moving parts, which make them really compelling to watch on the big screen. And we had a great talk with him, and I hope you enjoy it, because I know I did.
Well, pleasure to be with you here today.
Well, pleasure. Well, the pleasure is likewise. But I mean, first off, obviously, man, congratulations on the movie, man. It's a powerful piece, and I mean, I really enjoyed it. And I'm kind of curious, I guess, as my first question, what was sort of the inspiration for you to not just tell a story about the opioid crisis, but tackle it from multiple angles?
Well, thank you very much for saying that. It's nice to be here with you. Also some good news to report. You know, we've been number one here in America for the last 8 days at the top of the iTunes charts. So it's really getting out there to people, which is really exciting. And we were opened up in theaters as well, and we're the number one independent film, number one limited release film. So it's definitely making its way, which is very gratifying to me, because the inspiration for this really came from a personal place. Way back about 15 years ago, I had a friend passed away from opioid abuse.
Oh, wow.
And very little was known at the time then. You know, he was a young man, 29 years old, very bright, and you know, had everything going for him. And somehow he got into these pain pills. And then, you know, before we knew it, it was heroin. And then before we knew it, he was gone. And it was really, it was crazy. And, you know, we didn't know why, and well, the drugs, addicts. And so anyway, many years go by. And then all of a sudden there started to be a real interest in this in America, and trying to understand what happened exactly. And a bunch of disturbing information started to come out about what were potentially the role of the pharmaceutical companies in this epidemic. And so I hooked up with these reporters at the Los Angeles Times, and they had uncovered a tremendous amount of information about what the pharmaceutical manufacturers knew and when they knew it, and did they know that the product was more dangerous maybe than advertised, and had they really marketed these pills to people. And then as I started to learn about it, I read the LA Times studies, and they hooked me up with this undercover cop who had been the head of the prescription narcotics task force in Los Angeles with the DEA from the sheriff's office. And he busted a lot of the real cartels on which this film is based. This film is all really grounded in reality. Pretty much everything in here happened in one form or another. We start out with that great chase the boy through the snow. That was just something I read in the newspaper. There was a kid caught coming across the border. And there'd been all these films about Mexico and the cocaine trade and, the wall. But, as you know, up there, I guess the southern border, for us, the northern border, it's 2,000 miles. So I started to find out what was going on in Montreal, which is a beautiful city, but it's a port city. And, little by little, this crime saga started to take place in my mind. And I said, okay, well, let me try to fashion this into a story where we can look at the opioid topic from three different angles. The user on the ground, a person struggling with it, played so well here by Evangeline Lilly, Canadian actress whom I've always loved, from Lost. Gary Oldman, who plays this scientist, a composite of real people, a whistleblower within a pharmaceutical company that also explores how universities are involved and the role they play in drug discovery. And then a kind of classic, what we call a policier, Army Hammer, and believe it or not, myself, as undercover detectives trying to take down this fentanyl smuggling cartel. Fentanyl, we found out, was the next wave of this madness, a really super potent opioid and easily available to get in precursor form from China. So it's a long-winded explanation, but these were all of the ingredients that I put together, the elements that formed to tell the story. And I thought this three-pronged approach really suited the material well.
No, and it absolutely does. And I mean, I'm glad you brought it up because this does dovetail into another question I wanted to ask. This is your first time sort of in front of the camera. And I'm wondering what sort of was the necessity for you to take the part? Like, I got to imagine there's a bit of a story there.
Well, it's all Lenny Kravitz's fault, actually. So the musician Lenny Kravitz, about 4 years ago, he was making a music video in Los Angeles where I live. And he wanted to find someone to play a crazy director directing him. And he wanted a real director to do it. So we had a mutual friend. He said, well, what about Nick? So I went in and I auditioned for Lenny and his team. And he was like, okay, let me put you in. And so we went out, we shot this video for one day. It's called Sex. And you can see it on YouTube. And I just had such a great time. And I was playing this crazy director, having a breakdown, and never been in front of the camera before other than a little cameo in Arbitrage, my last film. And then they all say like, hey, you're doing a really good job. This is funny. So I don't know why. Then I got the idea in there like, well, maybe I can be a kind of comic relief. And so I was sitting around with my actors, we were rehearsing, and somebody said, oh yeah, how are we doing on the casting for the partner role? And I thought, okay, well, here's my big moment. I said, well, I was thinking maybe, I don't know, I would do it, and expecting to get laughed out of the room. And then everybody said, okay, great. Okay, so you're going to be in there. That's perfect. You know how to do it. And nobody stopped me. So you never know, are you going to be terrible or not? But I figured as long as I didn't cast myself as a preposterous romantic lead, I would be okay. And so, so I read some of the reviews, and one of them said that Jarecki is a nice screen presence, and maybe we'll be seeing a little more of them. So at least I entertained one person.
You did a good job. But I mean, talk to me a little bit just about the casting process, because Gary does bring this really sort of nervous gravitas to the material, which makes it feel all the more weighty, especially as everything starts to unfold.
Gary Oldman, I'd loved for many years, going back to True Romance, Sid and Nancy. And then I thought he was quite fine in Darkest Hour. And so we met in Los Angeles right around the time of Darkest Hour at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. And I had another project I wanted to discuss with him, and he was very cool. And he, he said that he had liked Arbitrage, and he said he thanked me for giving him the opportunity to look at a script. I thought, wow, okay, that's a pretty humble man, and very sweet. And so we started working on that. But then in the meantime, this took on more urgency as we saw the problem exploding. And I sat down for about 6 months and wrote Crisis. And then I brought it to him and I said, look, we're talking about, but this is pretty urgent. I think want to get into this. And right away he said, okay, I see it. I understand it. Let's do it. I'll come in. I'll produce the movie with you. Use my name. Go around and raise the money. Get the other cast. And he really was just a terrific partner in that way. And I love what you said. The nervous energy he brings to the role. He doesn't play this as a kind of Clark Gable way or anything like that. He really gives you a vulnerability, and he wasn't afraid to kind of be an everyman. And I think there's something really nice about that puts you in his corner. And you want him to kind of prevail over these opioid companies, which is hard to do.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, all these characters have this unique, flawed nature to them. And I mean, I definitely see some similarities between this and Arbitrage, with sort of these very complex universes and these multi-layer stories sort of crisscrossing each other. What is it about those kind of stories that sort of compels you as a storyteller?
Well, I think, I like the films that I grew up on, I guess. When I was a young man, I started watching a lot of the films from the 70s. I started with The Godfather. My mother told me, I was watching Back to the Future and all the other Hollywood movies. My mother said, okay, I have a movie I want you to watch, Godfather. And I said, I can't watch a black and white movie. And she said, listen, you idiot, sit down and put in the tape. And so I did. And I was really blown away. And I got introduced to this whole new world of film. And then I started watching all the Sidney Lumet movies, Dog Day Afternoon, Prince of the City, Serpico. And I got really into these 70s films. They had a lot of grit, and you could almost feel the cigarette ash on the negative. And we shoot all our films on 35 millimeter, trying to keep that tradition alive. But what I think with these films is they had anti-heroes at the center. They had people in extraordinary circumstances and people who were willing to color outside the lines. That really appealed to me. But they also had people who were in systems in crisis, or societies that had some type of corrupt element. I think a lot of that New York in the 1970s, I'm from New York, born in the 70s, and that was a time of great dysfunction within the city. It almost went bankrupt. Now you think of it as this gleaming steel and glass towers where all the world's billionaires congregate, but it has a rough past. And I think I like those films that look at how society has run amok, and it's not really just the character; they're a product of their environment. As Nicholson says so wonderfully in The Departed, he says, "I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me." And I like that idea. That's a really anti-hero kind of quote. So I like these characters who are fighting. In Arbitrage, we looked at a character at the top of society, Richard Gere, nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Actor, played Robert Miller, a billionaire at the top who's trying to hold it together. Here with Oldman, Lilly, and Hammer, I think you see, I wanted to do people who were more relatable, who were more what someone on my team, they said, little people doing big things. And I had loved that tradition in the 70s. And I think it was also born out of a 1940s cinema of Bogart and Bacall and Betty Davis, people who were put upon by society, but who, through the strength of their character, rose up.
Now, I think what I really love about this movie is that, I mean, while it's making the obvious statement of opioids bad, I mean, it really does sort of hammer home the idea that this is a messy issue, and it's important for people to sort of read up and sort of at least try to get an understanding on it rather than judging it. And I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, what is your hope as this story is sort of now out there in the universe? What do you want the takeaway from Crisis to be?
Well, I think again, it's David Mamet, who's one of my favorite writers, he said movies are not a form of social change. There's already a great tool for that, the barrel of a gun. And I like that idea, because you think of Pinochet or whatever, a movie's not going to mean too much. But what movies do first is they entertain. But if they entertain, I think, and they do their job, what they can do is they can provoke questions. And that's what I like to do. I don't want to say, somebody said, if you want to send a message, call Western Union. This is not about sending a message. This is not about activism, but it is about provoking questions. And for me, the question is, how do we want to deal with this as a society? Pain medication, pharmaceuticals, these are wonderful things. You know, these are life-changing things that enable people with cancer, debilitating pain to function. You know, life-saving drugs. I have a family member with cancer. You know, advances in pharmaceutical research has kept him alive for a decade. So I'm all for that. But what we really have to ask the question is, how do we let these things get away from ourselves? How do we not regulate, you know, gun sales, pharmaceutical sales, the marketing, you know, the companies going to doctors and say, oh, take this, go on a trip, go on a cruise, or just prescribe another 100,000 pills. You know, this is really where we failed our fellow man and woman by encouraging this kind of bad behavior. And, you know, the profit motive will drive anyone to do bad things. You know, I would think if you see something weird in society, you know, that doesn't feel quite right to you, just look around. There's someone getting rich from it. And I think we have to be more vigilant about this type of thing and say, well, there are limits. A pill can't solve everything. We got to put some safeguards, and we definitely have to put some money into education and treatment for those people that unfortunately get caught up in it. And
you know
the
what?
American drug war, I think, has been a great failure, you know, in doing that. And that's really where we got to put the energies to say addiction is a disease. It's and in the case of these pills, you have regular normal people who got prescribed a pill for a back injury. Now they're a full-blown addict, and that's not their fault.
No, but I think this film really does that. It's entertaining, but it sparks conversation, and it allows us to sort of understand that collectively we need to be better educated on this issue. And I mean, it's a fantastic little film, which like I said, I enjoyed immensely. And I just want to say thank you again for the time today, man. This was a lot of fun.
It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I really appreciate you watching, and I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.